I'm always so excited when we have Detroit-based founders on TFR as guests, and this guest has made an incredible impact throughout the city. Amy Peterson is the co-founder and CEO of Rebel Nell, a company dedicated to uplifting women and providing underserved women with a route to self-sufficiency and equitable opportunity. The company uses fallen street art to create sustainable jewelry, all while giving women an equal opportunity to work and renew their lives. Amy's story is so incredible and serves as an inspiration for Dominique and me to always keep impact at the core of what we do.
Amy started off as a lawyer and was the first ever associate female counsel for the Detroit Tigers. While she was working for the team as one of the few women in prominent MLB positions, she began to witness the everyday barriers her neighbors at a women's shelter next to her place in Detroit were facing. Shortly after, she met her co-founder and founded Rebel Nell. Because she could relate on a personal level to the struggles caused by women not being given equal opportunities, she made it her mission to have female empowerment as her company's central focus. Rebel Nell is now a certified social enterprise and has been nationally recognized for the work they've done over the past 9 years. Yes, we're going to dive right in. So you and I have talked a bit offline about your non-traditional start to social entrepreneurship. I mean, having a background in law, transitioning over. Can you kind of tell us more about like what that looked like for you and that process of deciding to go into becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, my life looks nothing like I thought it would. My dream was always to be in baseball and to be the first female general manager of a Major League Baseball team. I had that dream early on. I was like 14 years old, and pretty much set out to do it. I went to college, I went to law school, I went to business school, really to have a well-rounded brain. Not that I really wanted to be a business person or a lawyer. I just wanted to be able to compete on what I was considered up until very recently kind of the no girls allowed side of baseball. Shout out to Kim Ng for being the first woman to do it. I'm so proud of her. But I just kept trying. I worked a lot in sports during any opportunity I could. I ultimately I kept applying to work for different clubs. I have rejection letters out the wazoo. But ultimately, I got the opportunity to come to Detroit and worked for the Tigers for 11 years. I had ultimately became associate counsel for them, kind of working my way up from an intern. And to make a story as short as humanly possible, there were a lot of challenges being a woman in the industry and not being really encouraging of the drive I had to be on the player acquisition side of things. And at the time, I was living right next door to a well-known shelter. And I would come home from the games, I'd walk my dog, I'd have conversations with the residents. These were incredible women who I just heard their stories, how they left challenging situations in search of a better opportunity. And this just inspired me. I think I was facing my own challenges at work. And I thought, wow, what if I could just create a company that was solely dedicated to empowering women? What would that look like? When you always reflect back on the history of companies, everything is so fragmented because you have to summarize it in 5 minutes. But it was really long and drawn out. Rebel Nell was just going to be a passion project. And then it became something I couldn't stop thinking about. And I ran it for 5 years, honestly. And it only wasn't until the last 2 that I really was like, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could do something around it full time. And then ultimately I did. So it was a long drawn out process, but ultimately, I left sports in 2018 to pursue Rebel Nell full time. And that's how I became an entrepreneur.
I think what you spoke of when you would take your walk home, it was like that call, that pull, for you to make an impact in a different way. So one of the things that I love most about your story, and I know I've shared this with you before, is that you are the embodiment of being someone who's multifaceted, that you don't have to stay within a box, but you can also be this and that. So I think one thing that I like our listeners to really receive is that, you know, although we can have these really big goals, like there's a process to it, right?
Sure.
And there are certain points in our life where I'm sure you being in law school in some shape or form, something that you were doing as a general manager prepped you for certain things, whether it was just negotiations or how to maneuver a certain way strategically. So I think it's important that we just have to remember that we are in different times and seasons for a reason, and sometimes we're in a preparation season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And just for clarification, I never got to be general manager. That was the goal. Didn't get it, but I was an attorney. Our egos drive a lot of what we do. And one of the things I'm a work in progress is becoming comfortable with what I do is not who I am. And I think that sometimes takes time. I think we all, in many ways, especially when we're searching for dream job, or dream careers, that we put so much pressure on ourselves that it has to look a certain way, it has to be a certain way, you have to do certain things. And what happens when you change your mind? I think that was something that I struggled with. And was I failing myself? Was I failing my family? Because I always said I wanted to do this and they supported me. And then I went a complete pivot, totally something different. And it does change you. It changes your identity, but that's okay. Life is, you only get one life. And doing things because you think other people think it's how it should be, or what it should be for you, or even how you think isn't. I think we need to let go of that.
I completely agree. And it's crazy because right before you came on, maybe like a half an hour before or so, Dominique and I were actually talking about a very similar thing, which is that, we have to figure out how to silence the noise of the people around us and figure out the path that we're actually meant to go on. And I can relate to that so much because I was a pandemic grad and I had job offers that just like disappeared. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that is what I thought I was going to be doing. And I had this thing, Trio, which is my startup now, just bubbling in the back of my mind. I knew it was a problem I'd experienced. I knew it was a problem so many people across the globe were experiencing, which is heart disease. And I was like, what am I waiting for? And it was a moment where I had to think about, I know there are going to be some people who are upset, like my parents or other,
Sure.
people who are pursuing a traditional path and they're looking at me and going, oh, well, what is she doing over there? So that's such an important point. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's a good message to send to people to really just make sure, you have one shot at this life. Like you have to make sure that you know what your internal mission is and you figure out what that beacon is that's going to lead you through all the noise that is coming at you from around. And yeah, so over the last year, we've been super fortunate to have been able to talk to just really incredible, inspiring founders who have said very similar things. And they've all come from different backgrounds, ethnicities, careers. You've obviously taken such a unique path in that you started off as a lawyer and a lawyer in the world of baseball on top of that. And I think my favorite part about recording these episodes is that we just get to learn all of the moments that have actually driven founders to start their companies. So I would love for you to dive into one, when was the moment you realized that Rebel Nell is the thing that you needed to be working on? And I think Dom sort of transitioned us into that point. And also, how did you come up with the name for it?
Yeah, both good questions. It's never that one like moment, but I think for me, I always forget to give it this context when I'm talking about Rebel Nell and its formation. You have to picture Detroit 2010 through 2013. I mean, I moved downtown in 2007. It was different. It was very different. We were also in the midst of a major, one of the largest municipal bankruptcies, and you could feel it. It was already desolate, but then you could like feel it on top of it. And when I was living next door to the shelter, I could just visually see some of the services that were there on a regular basis were no longer there. Whether it was like the food truck that showed up and offered service, like it was a different feel then. And then, throw in on top of my work, which was very unique. I spent a lot of time doing some arbitration work, which is negotiating to get players higher salaries when they're already making pretty good money. And I would come home and I'd talk to these women who were just looking for jobs, looking for opportunities. And you could tell that they had so much going on, and often balancing kids and just trying to figure out what their next step is. And so I was living in this dual world. And I was like, well, what if that's when Rebel Nell was born from that? It's just a way to, I don't know, it was almost just like neighborly. These were my friends, these were women. And I was like, well, what if I could create a company that just was dedicated to providing not only the job, but then was a work culture that also provided the support and wraparound services. So they could do both. They could tackle both under one roof. And I thought maybe it'd just be like, I don't know, just something I did on the side. And then it just kept growing, and it just kept all I was thinking about. We had our first 3 hires, and they were amazing. And it wasn't all easy. It was very challenging. It still is super, super challenging. But imagine, like, I was still working full time with the Tigers. My off time or at night, I would switch over to Rebel Nell. I would use my lunch break, and I would run over to Rebel Nell to like check on the team because they do manufacturing. And this was crazy. It's crazy that we got through all these different times. But I think, my moment of when I knew we had something was when we took one of our first hires. We were selling at a place called the Rust Belt in Ferndale. Tiny booth right by the exit door. It was sub-zero Detroit winter. We couldn't afford a good booth, so we paid like $20, and it was right by the door. And she was working. Her kids were there with her. A woman came in and was like in awe of our jewelry, but it was a high price point. It was like a necklace. It was the most expensive we had. It was huge. It was $200, and we didn't get a chance to tell the woman at the time what it was made from and the story behind our company. And she was just like, "Okay, it's out of my price range. I'm going to think about it, and I'll come back." And I remember specifically telling Trish and saying, "That's retail life. Like, a lot of people say that they're never going to come back, so don't be disheartened." And she said, "Okay, bummer, but okay." Well, sure enough, like an hour later, the woman comes back. It's like, "I can't stop thinking about this one." We told her it was made out of fallen graffiti, and our company exists to empower women. And like, well, I gotta have it. And then she was great. She took a picture with Patricia, and she had her autograph, the card that comes with it. And I will never forget, like, Trish, the woman left, and Trisha could just collapse on the ground, and her kids came around her, and she was crying. She's like, "I made that, Amy. I made that piece. That was me. That was my idea for that piece." And I said, "Yeah, it was beautiful." And that woman loved it and appreciated it. She's like, gotta go back and make more. Like, it's Sunday. We're not open. Don't worry, you're gonna have plenty of time to make more jewelry. She's like, "But I made it." She kept saying it over and over and over. And the life that just came into her eyes, and you could see the confidence coming back. That was for me a big aha moment of, we had something special, and that's something that could be transformative. And I think that's that story in particular, which I tell pretty regularly, but it's such an important part of the journey, because that's the adrenaline rush. That's why I do what I do. It's not always that perfect. Not every story is that great, but it's those gems that you look out for.
Such an incredible story. And the fact that, that woman, she came back and she actually helped you guys make an impact on the lives of someone who was building just this amazing jewelry, and just helping them just have an opportunity to turn that around, and provide them with some empowerment. And I think this goes back to the question I was going to ask about your name, which also has a lot to do with empowerment. And I heard that you and your co-founder had several brainstorming sessions to figure out a name for the company. So it seemed really obvious to me at that point that you guys have solid communication. And we've spoken about this a little bit about how you guys have, worked on your relationship to have that solid communication. And that's so important. How did you guys meet, and what was it about her that made you think this is the right person to go on the journey with? And then, also the backstory of the name too.
The name. Yeah, it's funny. Our now partners were friends. So our husbands were friends. They knew each other. We didn't know each other that well, but we were acquaintances enough to, a loose friendship, because we were at many similar places together. And her husband's an entrepreneur, and I was telling him I had this idea, and he said, "Well, you talk to my girlfriend and tell her about it." She had fairly recently moved to Detroit, was trying to figure out her something to make her passionate. She comes from the retail world, and so we were out for drinks. I actually think it was her birthday, and I got this idea about this company teaching women to fish. And she said, I'm interested. I'd love to volunteer when you get up and running. I was like, nope, need someone to do it with me. I basically made her sign the contract on the napkin at the bar and really suckered her into it. But it was the greatest thing I ever did. And it goes against everything I stand for. I mean, we weren't super close friends. Now, she's the yin to my yang, essentially a sister. I couldn't live without her. But at the time, I always say to you, do not go, don't go into business with your friends. Just don't. I see it time and time again. It ruins relationships because it's hard. It's like a marriage. But we worked out great. She's the exact opposite of me. We have very, very healthy communication. We trust each other wholeheartedly, but that has taken work. And, you can reflect back on times when it could have gone south if one of us, didn't step up at the time and recognize, okay, we need to work on us. I need, hear each other out. And that was important. I think that to understand our ebb and flow, and to understand that we're both passionate, we both want the same thing. And so that communication is everything. Communication is key. And that to me is making sure that we put each other too as a priority. It's still a work in progress for us, but no one works harder, no one gives more than the founders. And how do we be our own checks and balances for when things are really rough? I had a really bad time last year, and she was there for me. So I think that's it. But when we were coming up with our name, this was such a fun part is we wanted it to be reflective of the work that we're doing, because we obviously provide employment for women who are coming from shelters, and we make unique, one-of-a-kind jewelry. So, and we thought it'd be cool if we could pay tribute to a woman who was a trailblazer. So we went back and forth. Oh my God, it must have taken us 4 months until finally we both realized we had a love affair for Eleanor Roosevelt and what she stood for. She was an incredible humanitarian, civil rights activist, women's rights advocate. Amazing. If you don't know much about her, I encourage anyone who's listening, just Google her. She actually had a social enterprise. Nobody knows this, but she had one. It was a mining company. It was like a mining city. It's fascinating. She was so ahead of the time. Anyway, her dad called her Little Nell. We thought she deserved a more badass nickname. So I got Rebel Nell. We also believe that the women walk through our doors are really rebelling against what life has dealt to them. And we're dealing with fallen street art. So it's Rebellious Art Form. That's how we got our name.
I love that story. And no, I did not know that she had her social enterprise of her own.
She's so cool. So cool. She was the other from a Detroit history perspective. She put the shovel in the ground for the Brewster projects. She was here, and at the time they were heralded as being incredibly successful for economic development. So yeah, she's really interesting. Really interesting.
Well, speaking of rebels, just to go back a bit, you mentioned earlier about how, it's just the importance of not listening to what other people think, especially when you're about to make a huge transition, right? So if we go back to the space you were in, you mentioned that you worked on Rebel Nell for a few years before you quit your job. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles, like kind of similar to the conversation Isha and I were having earlier, is being an entrepreneur. You still want to pay your bills, you still want to make sure that you're okay, and not really knowing when to fully transition over. So if you kind of had some insight or tips that you would share with anybody, what would you say?
I mean, you really got to do some soul searching. You've got to come up with what your comfort level is, do some planning, knowing that, you're not probably unlikely. I mean, every situation is different. So take it with a grain of salt, right? Like some people,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship is born because they lost their job. And so, but from my scenario where you have a job and you've got a passion project, I want to, put it within that framework, that lens, for me, I had to really have conversations with my partner and talk to him about what this is going to look for our family. I'm going to take a huge pay cut. What would make us feel comfortable enough knowing that I was going to take the leap? Do we need to work on a savings for X dollars? And that was important to have those conversations, and then just being mentally ready too. Like there's a lot. I think I was stepping away from a dream job and going into something, and that took a lot of time. That took like 2 years of really soul searching to figure out who I was and what I was willing to let go of, and checking your ego. And so I don't think anything is overnight. I would encourage not to be overnight. I would give yourself the grace and time to kind of think through it a little bit, and put a plan in place. And I think there's other things that we do now is like we live in a cool time where you can be very entrepreneurial just in general, like you can drive Uber, you can have an Airbnb, like there's other ways that you can generate income. And Detroiters, good Lord, we all got a side hustle or 10.
Right, or 10, exactly. So I think it's proven that you can do both. Like you can have something on the side and then still work at your day job, or make it what you want. Like you said with Uber, like DoorDash, there's so many different things.
There's
so it's
ways,
true. Yeah, there's a million different ways. So transitioning from your role in a corporate job, would that be okay to say?
Yeah.
And then going into full-time entrepreneurship, how did you shift from visionary into being a coach? Because I think that is a really tough transition.
Totally hard. I'm still figuring it out. That's honestly one of my greatest weaknesses, I think, is I'm not a good coach. My business partner is. She's truly gifted with the patience and the ability to coach people. She's tried to coach me to be a better coach, and I appreciate the lessons. It's not in my DNA. I was born without patience. So I think there's two ways to handle it: is recognizing your weaknesses and not trying to force it just because it's what a typical role requires. But making sure that if it's a critical part of the organization, that you have somebody who can help you with it. Because for sure, visionary, I love that. That's what I love to do. It's a strength of mine and something I didn't fully appreciate. But I've always had the challenge of, I assume people know, and that's gets me in trouble all the time. Especially as we're growing and adding more people to the team. In my head, they all have the same institutional knowledge that I have, and it's not fair to them. It's just the way that I am. So that's my biggest advice, I think, is find someone who complements your weaknesses, and let that be the first hire on the team.
Yeah, that was really good. One thing I found is that, of course, as our roles shift, we have to shift, right? And
yes.
I have always been the relationship oriented person in team type of atmospheres. And I went from shifting from that. And I think anybody who starts something and you're a founder, you're a visionary just naturally. But I had to shift from that into being more execution. And I think I learned that because when you don't have the resources and you're launching something, it's like you have to figure it out, right? Yes. So just becoming a doer. And so now I don't know if I think my patience may have went down a bit more, but it's more in like, nope, I just know what I need to do to get it done. So I think for me, I'm terrified of even hiring, like for my first hire, because I'm like, oh my gosh, am I gonna do this right? Da, 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 I don't know. So it's really scary, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because I see that now in a lot of founders just trying to make that hard switch of leading by example, but not really like, no, but you have to teach by example, if that makes sense, and coach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just was curious kind of what you thought about that.
Yeah, and actually, I think that what you bring up, that makes the best entrepreneurs, is the visionary who's also a doer. As I say, people say it all the time. Lots of people have great ideas. It's being able to do both, to have the vision and the execution. Because that, to your point, too, that's more of leading by example versus like the coaching. And in many ways, that is me. Like, people can follow, and I get my hands dirty. I'm doing everything. I'm changing light bulbs at our stores, and so I think that may be where if I'm a coach or a leader, it's more by my actions versus Diana's just incredible at educating and taking the time and really nurturing everybody as we onboard them. She does a much better job of that.
Yeah, there are so many aspects of Rebel Nell that I feel like people should learn from, but especially I think people should learn from your guys' dedication to the mission of the company, and just like bringing people on who are going to support that. So you talked about the origin story, and now I'm kind of curious to move into like the moving parts that all come together to empower women in Detroit. So beyond the core work that you guys do, you guys also have stuff like the Female Founders book, for example, to highlight strong, successful women. Can you take us through how you empower women through your core business and also through additional projects like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what I love to do. I really do love it. I love seeing women succeed, and it's baked into our core. I mean, that's the reason Rebel Nell exists, is to provide employment, equitable opportunity, and wraparound support. That's our mission for women with barriers. And you see a lot of companies now, particularly when there's this amazing conscious consumerism trend to be more transparent with companies, and companies are struggling. It's hard to pivot when you're built a certain way. It really is. You can't just throw I don't know, goodwill. You gotta really earn it, and ours is baked into our core, so it's part of every decision we make and everything we do, including not just us. I believe a rising tide rises all boats, and it's just everybody needs access to that boat. And we did a Female Founders book. It's our second year doing it, to highlight other women-owned businesses. That was stemmed from last year, just finding a way to get vocal in the community and realize, I mean, of course, with the pandemic, female founders were hit so hard. There were a lot that have closed, and to be able to try our best to uplift them and shine a light on them. And in fact, this year I was really excited. The proceeds from our Female Founders book, we were able to give a $500 grant to a startup, female founder startup in Detroit. So that was exciting. That was a new development this year, but it's who we are. It's what we do. It's through all of our initiatives, and making sure we walk the walk.
That's awesome. And just so everyone knows, Rebel Nell is structured as a social enterprise, right?
Yes, we are a social enterprise. We are a certified women-owned business and social enterprise.
Love it. You spoke last time we chatted about an accelerator program that has been really phenomenal. There aren't many around really for social enterprises. It seems like they're really growing now. And so I just wanted to speak to you about funding as a social enterprise, and how that impact investing that you may receive, how it could be a bit tricky because sometimes social enterprises are seen as nonprofits and vice versa, depending on, what arena, you're in at the time. So I just wanted to speak to you more about like your journey to establishing yourself as a social enterprise. What did that look like then, and what does it look like now, moving forward within this new landscape of more social entrepreneurs being made and funded?
Yeah, we are still, I think, a square peg round hole. So we're structured as a limited low profit liability company, which is an L3C. It's specifically set up for social enterprises. Not real advantages yet. There's no like tax advantage to being, it's still an LLC. You're still taxed the same way. For me, I just feel passionately about proving that you can be a for-profit business and put your people first. Like, I don't know, it's like an axe to grind. It's part of why I did it. I like the idea of really pushing and being sustainable, profitable, let alone like sustainable is where you don't need to be so greedy. You can, I want to make money, but so should everybody that's around me and involved with Rebel Nell. And so that to me is why we did it, is to see if you can have a culture that is dedicated to your people as well as making profit. And I love the idea of, with nonprofits in many respects, and it's a lot of nonprofits have social enterprises too, but the traditional nonprofits where you're constantly relying on grants makes it a little tricky because what if those grants dry up? I like this because we're kind of in control of our own destiny. Now, that being said, we do work really closely with a nonprofit that we helped form and now partner with called Teach, Empower, Achieve, which provides all of the wraparound support for our creative designers, for our employees, and that's critical to their success. We used to have it all under the roof of Rebel Nell, and it just wasn't financially, it just didn't make sense. So after learning that a lot of other social enterprises operate this way, where you've got the for-profit and then partnered with a nonprofit, and I think this beautiful blend is a great way for the world to go, because then you're creating, I think the money can go further, like the foundation money can go a lot farther because you can spread it out more and not go so deep, because the social enterprises can help support both the nonprofit and themselves. I can talk for hours about my feelings on that, but that's really why we did it. And yeah, we got certified as a U.S. social enterprise. And yeah, I think we could do it.
Rebel Nell incorporates a lot of just the terms you're using, like wraparound, empowerment, holistic. Like, you guys are providing services. Like, it really is the perfect fit with you and your co-founder, because you guys are able to actually provide services that social workers essentially provide. But that's why social really does work, when we come together as a community to help. So I just remember being in my program, and when I was interning at Build, I learned about you, and then I learned about you again because you guys were featured. I think we were all in the same article or something for Wayne State alums. And so I was like, wow, that's really, really neat.
I thought it was really exciting because we didn't know that you had an actual store before we started like researching for the podcast. I thought it was like your guys' main HQ. But you guys actually have a store. And then I was reading about how you guys are planning on potentially expanding out of Michigan. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and your plans to scale and how that's all going, I think that would be really valuable for some of our listeners who are maybe thinking of taking their brands out of just, the city that they're in currently.
Yes. So we have a retail store in Detroit at 1314 Holden, which is where we also manufacture. And then we opened our second brick and mortar, but for standalone at 12 Oaks. So we're currently at 12 Oaks Mall. And it's interesting. I never thought I'd be like retail driven with our brand. I thought we'd always be e-commerce because that was kind of the wave of the future when we started. But now it's interesting with the pandemic. It's kind of our experience that everybody like our size went online, and and so now the competition is even more intense for ad dollars and the attention span of consumers, where now, in retail stores, now that people are feeling a little more comfortable going out, we get a little more time to tell our story. And so it's part of our marketing plan is to actually do some more retail stores, but we're really taking an omni-channel approach where it's wholesale, retail, and e-commerce to really grow the business. But ultimately, our bread and butter, or if you will, is really people and word of mouth. We're so fortunate. We love our customers so much that they're really loyal, that when somebody buys a piece of Rebel Nell, they come back. So that's good.
It's going to be really exciting to see how your journey is, just going into like more retail, especially like you said, in a world where everything is going digital, and it's so important to somehow get your story across in person if you can. That's so powerful. So that's going to be really interesting to see for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I wanted to shout you out because this is the Detroit necklace here. I'll do
Yay!
a close up maybe when we finish. Yes. Oh, nice.
I've got my strong on.
Yeah, so for me, it's like I love wearing the Detroit necklace or seeing the strong necklace you have on because it just makes me feel like it's like a reminder, a wearable affirmation, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so I love it. So, you spoke about being intentional and really living a life of fulfillment. And I wanted to talk to you about what does purpose mean to you? Because on the outside, it seems like you're living it, and part of your purpose is really to connect others to access an opportunity. And I'm just a huge fan of that because I feel like once you've taught someone something, they really can be able to apply it forever. So yeah, can you tell us more about what you think your purpose is and how you are using it to impact lives?
I think my purpose is to really drive and stay focused and follow the vision, trust the process for building Rebel Nell. I really want to be the nationally recognized brand that has measurable impact, not only in our community but also outside of it. To stand for equality, to stand for empowering women, and I know that's really so overused, but it wasn't when we started. So I think I think that we truly do stand for it, and also my purpose is to constantly be better. I want to be a better human. I want to be better for my team. I want to be a better leader, and that's I think that's my purpose.
You've talked about how through all of the moments that made you feel defeated, your team has really been there to rally around you. You talked a little bit about how your co-founder did that for you this past year, and just how they've kept you going, and as well as the importance of just putting one foot in front of the other when things are tough, to strive to make any impact that you can. And so obviously these past 2 years have been especially trying for the world. And it's unfortunately still going, but yet we have to find a way to go on and help empower others, especially because all of the cracks in the broken systems have just been amplified like crazy by this pandemic. So to close us off, as we look towards the future, what are your hopes for your team at Rebel Nell, and what are you looking to accomplish moving forward?
Oh man, for my team at Rebel Nell, I just like the sky's the limit. In fact, I get really, it's always sad when they leave, but I get really excited about it. We're such a backwards company. It's like we get people in and train them to be incredible employees, and then we usher them out. You know, it's really because we know that they are bound for greatness and amazing things. And we're actually doing a reunion in June, kind of in anticipation of our 10-year anniversary next year. And I'm so excited to see everybody, and we're getting great responses from people who are coming back for it. And it means a lot. It means a lot. And I'm just excited to, for our 20th and our 30th reunion, and to see how many lives we can impact, and see the kids and catch up on where they are today. But I mean, it goes across the board, like even for people in our, front of the house team, if they go on and take different jobs, I really want the best for everybody. And I think that's how the world should be. It should be competitive. There's so much for everybody.